Well, it finally happened. The long awaited map is finally out, and oh boy do I have a lot to say about it. First off, I'm just going to go into what I think about the map overall, and then I'll do a brief dive into everything we can see here, their impacts on the lore, and of course, as is my way, looking at the real history behind it. Now, first off, I want to say the artwork in this map, I love it. It's so stylized. And it really does look like one of those old maps you'd find in like a history documentary or something. So, absolute well done to Jared Blando, the artist for this map. I really love how they've worked out at least the European continent and some of Africa and the Middle East. It looks just phenomenal. But one gripe I do have with this map is it's kind of difficult to tell which countries are which, or what is a country and what is just a state within a larger country, if that makes sense. Like, maybe if it had more colour in it, or the borders were a bit more obvious. Because, look, especially with the Principality of Kiev, I didn't know if that was just this landmark, or also included the Kievan Rus and the Cossacks. Because then also the Kievan Rus and the Cossacks seem to be over these two different regions, and then there's a third unmarked region. It's just a bit confusing in that sort of way. Same with how Finlandia, Gothland, Kingdom of Norway, and Denmark have different borders, but no names on Denmark, and stuff like that. That's all, just a bit hard to read in some places. Otherwise, I absolutely love this, and I love how the hellish domains look like they are creeping into the faithful forces, which is a really good way of doing it, because it shows a difference between areas where they're advancing, like in Namibia, and areas where they're like steadfast by either water or the Iron Wall here, like in Byzantium, in Constantinople. And of course, along the Iron Wall, where you can see there's no pieces of it growing past. But without further ado, let's get into the analysis of the map and the deep dive. But where to start? Well, of course, where else but my own homeland of Ireland. Or in this world, Éire, the Irish for Ireland. Still, of course, missing the fada, so I'm beginning to think at this point it's just spelled that way in this universe. On to my main point about Ireland. Why is the capital Kilkenny? Like, I'm just wondering, is there like a historical importance to Kilkenny in this world that made it the capital over Dublin? Now, if it has something to do with it being the capital of the Norman invasion during the 12th century, then that means despite hell itself opening, the British still tried to invade us. Again. You know what, that actually seems very likely, that makes a lot of sense. But even then, Dublin was always the biggest since its establishment in 998, so we will see their explanation someday, I hope, but yeah, that just caused a bit of confusion. At least in Trench Crusade, though, we are one unified country, meaning that the Ulster plantations didn't divide the nation between Catholic and Protestant, and that the harsh prosecution of the Irish natives hopefully never occurred, with the likes of the famine never happening and us not losing a huge chunk of our population. In this world, we have seemingly maintained our independence, never falling to British rule, and never being weakened by 800 years of oppression. In the world of Trench Crusade, Ireland is the bastion of Christianity it was always known for. Now, moving right to see how our Celtic cousins are doing, Scotland seems to have kept its original name of Alba, and is its own independent kingdom. Some Scots have just been made very happy by this. Its capital is Doondarlan, which is across the bay from the real-world Scotland's capital of Edinburgh. Now, what exactly Doondarlan is, I don't know. It's not the original name for Edinburgh, that's Doon So I have a question for any Scots in the comments. Please explain. I don't know what Doondarlan is. Like, looking it up didn't bring up any results. Moving down to England, it seems pretty much the same as it is in our world, with similar borders with Scotland and Wales, except for the fact that Cornwall is independent. A curious choice, but an interesting one to be sure. Wales is, well, Wales, also independent, maybe, since there has been no mention of the UK. I assume it was never formed. This, as we know, is a massive win. Now, as we know about the British Isles, they are one of the most stalwart defended areas due to the British Navy and the strong fighting forces of Scottish, Irish, English, and Welsh soldiers in the region. So this brings me on to my theory as to what these, well, it's not really a theory, I'm fairly sure it got confirmed, but what these golden rings are. I believe this is areas where the faithful forces hold complete military and naval superiority over the forces of hell. This is because of the moving fortress of Britannia, but otherwise the British Isles seems mostly unchanged. Now, moving down to the European mainland, we meet our first major divergence from our real-world map, the Duchy of Normandy. In our world, the Duchy of Normandy emerged in 911 when Frankish King Charles the Simple granted Viking leader Rollo lands around the Rhine. In exchange, Rollo pledged loyalty and converted to Christianity. The Norse settlers, known as Normans, gradually adopted Frankish culture, creating a distinct Norman identity. Under strong rulers like William the Conqueror, Normandy became a formidable power. In 1066, William invaded England, defeating King Harold at the Battle of Hastings. This conquest established Norman rule in England, reshaping its monarchy, language, and feudal system. Normandy remained tied to England, leading to tensions with the French crown. In 1204, King Philip II of France seized the duchy from England's King John, ending over a century of Anglo-Norman rule. Normandy was later a battleground in the 100 Years' War, with England briefly reclaiming it before France's final victory in 1450. But of course, in Trench Crusade, the timeline differed. With the opening of the Hellgate, I feel most hostilities in Europe ceased, and so the Duchy of Normandy has survived to the modern day in Trench Crusade. Beside the duchy is the Royal Demesne of France. The Royal Demesne, or domain, was the land directly controlled by the French crown during the Middle Ages. Unlike territories ruled by feudal lords, these lands provided the monarchy with income, military power, and political authority. Though initially small, the Demesne expanded over centuries, helping centralize royal power. The Capetian dynasty, beginning with Hugh Capet in 987, inherited a modest Demesne, centered around Paris and Orleans. At the time, France was fragmented, with powerful dukes and counts ruling vast regions. The early Capetians relied on the Demesne's resources to maintain influence. Though their real power was limited, the Demesne grew significantly under Philip II Augustus, who seized key territories from rebellious vassals. His victory over King John of England in 1204 reclaimed Normandy, Anjou, and parts of Aquitaine, dramatically increasing the royal lands. This expansion strengthened the monarchy economically and militarily. Louis IX and Philip IV, the fair continued, consolidating power, acquiring lands through marriage, inheritance, and legal disputes. By the 14th century, the Demesne included much of northern and central France, reducing feudal lords' autonomy, and during the 100 Years' War, the Demesne suffered losses to England, but the French kings later recovered and expanded. By the early modern period, the concept of a separate royal Demesne faded as France became a unified, centralized state. The royal Demesne was crucial in transforming France from a feudal patchwork into a strong monarchy. It provided financial stability, reduced noble independence, and laid the foundation for absolute rule under the Bourbon kings. The growth of the royal Demesne mirrored France's rise as a dominant European power, making a key step in the development of modern French states. Clearly, in this world, these expansionary wars never occurred due to the far larger threat of Hell's invasions. For this reason, France never truly became a full country, with Normandy, Aquitaine, and Toulouse remaining independent. As we can see below the Royal Demesne, Avignon burns, overrun by the Black Grail. It has fallen to sin and despair. This is the mark of the Corpse Wars, and the ending of the terror of the Black Grail hegemon. After its defeat, Black Grail forces stormed Avignon. This is also the region the anti-pope lived and ruled in the time of two popes. And, as in Trench Crusade, Avignon fell due to a jealous cardinal who wished to be the supreme pontiff. I feel it is heavily based off the anti-pope and is going to share a lot of similarities. So that's just one thing that I thought was really cool. Moving away from France, we can see Spain is also split into multiple regions, but they all seem to fall under the Castilla-Aragon Union. This union was, much like many things in Trench Crusade, a real event in our own history. The union of Castile and Aragon was a pivotal event in Spanish history, marking the foundation of a unified Spain. It began in 1469 with the marriage of Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile. Though their marriage united the two crowns, Castile and Aragon remained separate kingdoms with distinct laws, languages, and administrations. Ferdinand and Isabella, known as the Catholic monarchs, worked together to strengthen royal authority and reduce the power of the nobility. They established a more centralized monarchy and reformed the legal and administrative systems. Together, they completed the Reconquista in 1492 by capturing Granada, the last Muslim stronghold in Iberia. That same year, they sponsored Christopher Columbus's voyage, leading to the Spanish colonization of the Americas. Now, obviously, in the world of Trench Crusade, Christopher Columbus was never set out to colonize the Americas, as hell kind of invaded. So, it seems that they never really progressed past the Castile Union, and so Spain as a country never fully formally unified, and has spent all its time battling off the invasion from Gibraltar, which clearly has taken quite a bit of territory. In Trench Crusade, Spain's capital is the ancient city of Toledo. This was the capital of the region for centuries and has strong ties to religion and culture in Iberia. Portugal seems similar to our real-world country's borders in terms of history, and Lisbon is still the capital, so I assume it runs very similar to our own. Across the Mediterranean, the Papal States lay claim over nearly all of the Italian peninsula. Clearly, in the world of Trench Crusade, the Papal States are a powerhouse of faith, power, and influence, with the Pope himself living in its capital of Rome, within the Papal City of the Vatican. This is a stark difference to our world. The Papal States were a series of territories in central Italy under the direct sovereign rule of the Pope. They existed from around the 8th century until 1870, and played a major role in both religious and political affairs in medieval and early modern Europe. The origins of the Papal States dates back to the donation of Pepin in 756, when Pepin the Short, king of the Franks, granted lands in central Italy to the Pope. This gift established the Pope not only as a spiritual leader, but as a temporal ruler. Over time, the Papal States expanded to include large areas such as Lazio, Umbria, the March, and parts of Emilia-Romagna. Throughout the Middle Ages, the Papal States were often at the centre of conflict between various noble families, the Holy Roman Empire, and other Italian city-states. The Pope's dual role as religious and political leader often led to power struggles, both within the Church and with secular rulers. Despite this, the Papal State remained a significant theocratic power. During the Renaissance, the Papal States became a cultural and artistic hub, with Rome flourishing under popes like Julius II and Leo X. However, political instability, corruption, and foreign invasions weakened the region over time. In the 19th century, the rise of Italian nationalism and the unification movement known as Risorgimento challenged papal rule. In the world of Trench Crusade, there would have never been a challenge, meaning Italy never would have unified, which explains why places such as Genoa and Sicily seem to be somewhat independent. Now, Genoa is an interesting one. Genoa has a rich maritime history. It was a powerful maritime republic located in northwestern Italy, and rose to prominence in the Middle Ages as a major trading and naval power. Its history is marked by commerce, exploration, and rivalry with other Mediterranean powers, especially Venice. Originally a small fishing town, Genoa began expanding in the 11th century, developing a strong merchant fleet and gaining independence from local feudal lords. By the 12th century, it had become a self-governing republic ruled by wealthy merchant families. Genoese ships traded throughout the Republic, the Mediterranean, and the Black Sea, establishing colonies and trading posts from North Africa to the Middle East and even Crimea. Genoa played a key role in the Crusades, providing ships and supplies in exchange for commercial privileges in the Holy Land and the Byzantine Empire. It reached its height between the 13th and 14th century, rivaling Venice in wealth and influence. However, internal conflicts between noble factions and wars with Venice, especially the War of Chioggia, weakened Genoa. Due to its history, I believe in the world of Trench Crusade, Genoa will be a naval powerhouse, or at least a strong naval power, guarding the Italian peninsula against heretic raiders. I also feel it'll have a specific want to recapture Venice, simply because of the historic rivalries between them, so whatever demon is in Venice is going to have to deal with the Genoetians. I think that'll be very interesting to see. Above the Italias lies Switzerland, which is much larger in this world than our own, owning a large part of the Alps, and I'm guessing probably still staying neutral. Mammon probably has a few gold reserves locked in there anyway. Maybe that would be an interesting fight. Switzerland versus Mammon. Who gets all the gold? Above the Swiss is the powerhouse of the faithful in Europe, the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire was a multi-ethnic and decentralized political entity in Central Europe, lasting from 962 to 1806. It originated when Otto I, King of Germany, was crowned emperor by the Pope in 962, reviving the idea of a Western Roman Empire under Christian leadership. The empire claimed to be the political heir of ancient Rome and the religious protector of Christendom. At its height, the Holy Roman Empire encompassed much of modern-day Germany, Austria, Switzerland, the Czech Republic, parts of Italy, Belgium, the Netherlands, and eastern France. However, unlike centralized monarchies like France or England, the empire was a loose confederation of kingdoms, duchies, principalities, bishoprics, and free cities, each with significant autonomy. The emperor was elected by a group of powerful princes known as electors, making the monarchy elective rather than hereditary. Throughout its history, the empire struggled with internal divisions, religious conflicts, and power struggles between emperors and the papacy. The investiture controversy was a major conflict over whether the pope or emperor could appoint bishops. This conflict weakened imperial authority and contributed to the political fragmentation of the empire. The empire structure was further complicated by the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century, of which we've heard no word of in Trench Crusade. I'm very curious to see if the Protestant Reformation ever happened and if there was a split in Christian resolve during the war. We know of the wars of Triclavianism, but that is in no way comparable to how damaging the Protestant Reformation was to a unified Europe. Religious wars, especially the 30 Years' War, which I assume also never happened in Trench Crusade, devastated large parts of the empire and led to the Peace of Westphalia, which granted greater independence to individual states and confirmed the empire's fragmented nature. Despite these challenges, the empire remained an important institution. It preserved a degree of unity among German-speaking lands and played a key role in European diplomacy and warfare. The Habsburg dynasty dominated the imperial throne from the 15th century onward, using it to advance their dynastic interests. By the 18th century, the empire had become largely symbolic, with real power held by the local rulers. In 1806, during the Napoleonic Wars, Emperor Francis II dissolved the Holy Roman Empire, after Napoleon created the rival Confederacy of the Rhine. Francis then styled himself Emperor of Austria, ending 800 years of imperial tradition. The Holy Roman Empire was a unique blend of medieval feudalism, Christian ideology, and imperial ambition. Though often politically fragmented, it remained a central force in European history for nearly a millennium. In Trench Crusade, the factions of Europe come to somewhat of a standstill at the releasing of the Hellish hordes. The Holy Roman Empire was at its height and has not fallen since. It is one of the most powerful and most influential of the faithful nations, supplying thousands of warriors to the front line and funding the holy cause. Now, Okay, this is where we get to one of my few gripes with the map. How unclear it is. Where is Prussia? We know Prussia is a free state, its own entity after its democratic succession from the Holy Roman Empire. So why does it not appear on the map? If you look above the Holy Roman Empire, to where Prussia originally was, we can see that Potsdam is labelled as a capital and appears to have the Prussian eagle waving above it, but it's not labelled the Free State of Prussia. Just felt it wasn't very clear, and if you want to learn more about Prussia and its alternate and real history, watch my previous video about the state forged in iron and blood. For now, I'll just quickly summarise it for the sake of time. The Free State of Prussia in the world of Crusade is an elite force within the Faithful Arsenal. They are a heavy units faction with elite shock troops and tank-splitting knights. They are a democratic free state that broke away from the Holy Roman Empire and have defended their independence with stalwart force. They sent troops north to help face the demons from the northern Hellgate, along with elite special forces to every front with Hell. They were a strong and proud state forged through iron and blood, and their martial prowess and ironclad will has brought them great renown in the world of Crusade. Above them is the Kalmar Union, another place the map did not show very clearly. From my own personal thoughts on the matter, it seems the Kalmar Union is the same as that of our time, a union between the Scandinavian countries of Norway, Sweden, Finland and Denmark. However, on the map, each has their own name and capital mentioned. This leaves two options. Either the Kalmar Union is just that frozen bit up the top, which makes absolutely no sense, or the Union is only a political one, like a defence pact or an alliance instead of one nation. This would explain how and why the Kalmar Union persists to the modern day of Crusade, as in our world, the fact that Sweden dominated the Union was what caused it to collapse. The Kalmar Union is one of the main forces that combats the Northern Hellgate, a gate in the Kola Peninsula that appears bringing devastation to Northern Europe and Russia. If you wish to learn more about them and their northern enemies, watch my video on the Northern Hellgate and the real history of the nations mentioned around it. Another one that was mentioned in that lore segment and my video is the Tsardom of Novgorod. This seems to have far more land than its historical counterpart, and well, I can't quite tell if the noble houses of the Rus are included in the Tsardom. I would assume so, since it's a Tsardom and not a republic, meaning it was run by the said nobles. If you want to learn the full history of the real Republic of Novgorod, it is also in that video of the Northern Hellgate. To be honest, I don't know why the Kingdom of Perm is still independent. The Kingdom of Perm was a medieval polity located in the Ural region of modern-day Russia, primarily inhabited by the Komi people. It emerged around the 9th century as a loose tribal confederation, but gradually developed into a more centralized entity due to growing trade with Novgorod, and later with other Russian principalities. Its wealth came largely from the fur trade, and access to valuable natural resources in the Ural Mountains. By the 14th century, the region became known as Great Perm, with its centre around the upper Kama River. The kingdom was both culturally and religiously distinct, practicing a mix of indigenous paganism and later Eastern Orthodoxy, especially after missionary efforts by the Russian clergy in the 14th and 15th century. Perm maintained relative autonomy until the late 15th century, when it was gradually absorbed by the expanding Grand Duchy of Moscow. In 1472, Muscovite forces led by Prince Fyodor Pestro captured Cherdyn, the political capital of Perm, marking the end of its independence, and the region was then reorganized under the Muscovite control, serving as a key frontier for further eastward expansions into Siberia. Today, the legacy of the Kingdom of Perm lives in the cultural identity of the Komi people. I would have expected in the world of Crusade that the Kingdom of Perm would unify with the Tsardom of Novgorod, simply for political and military reasons to fight off the Hellish forces, though because it does seem rather far from any Hellish front, maybe it isn't as affected and thus continues to not see it as much of a threat and remain independent. Now, beside the Kingdom of Perm is Baba Yaga's house, a fun little Easter egg, and totally there because of Feel No Paint. He definitely put that there. It's all up to him. He made one comment about it one time, they fully listened. Moving back towards Europe, the Baltics are almost fully under the control of the Teutonic Order. The Teutonic Order was founded in 1190 during the Third Crusade as a German Catholic military order. Initially focused on aiding Christian pilgrims and crusaders in the Holy Land, it was formally recognized by the Pope in 1198. After the fall of the Crusader states, it reorganized its focus to Eastern Europe. In 1226, Duke Conrad of Masovia invited the Teutonic Knights to help defend his land against pagan Prussian tribes. The order used this opportunity to launch a conquest of Prussian lands, establishing a theocratic state along the southeastern Baltic coast. Over the 13th century, the Teutonic state expanded into Prussia, Livonia, and parts of modern-day Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. The order aggressively Christianized the regions through military campaigns, building castles, towns, and churches. At its height in the 14th century, the Teutonic state was a powerful military and political force. However, its expansion brought into conflict with its neighbours, especially the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and the Kingdom of Poland, and the decisive Battle of Grunwald in 1410, where the order suffered a crushing defeat by the Polish-Lithuanian forces, marked the beginning of its decline. The 1466 Second Peace of Thorn forced the Teutonic Order to cede Western Prussia to Poland, reducing the Teutonic state to a Polish vassal. And in 1525, Grand Maester Albert of Brandenburg converted to Lutheranism and secularized the remaining territory, creating the Duchy of Prussia as a hereditary fief under the Polish crown. This marked the end of the Teutonic state as a religious military power. But, as you can tell, the Teutonic Order was quite divisive in the history of that region. Not only did it lead the formation of Prussia, but it also was destroyed by the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. So why does it exist in the world of Trench Crusade? To be honest, I'm not sure. Why would there have been a Third Crusade? Did the Northern Hell Demons make their way down to that region, and the Teutonic Order was sent to stop them? All is yet to be revealed, but I can definitely see tensions between the Free State, the Teutonic Order, and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which would be quite an interesting story to explore. And now onto the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth itself. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was a dual-state union between the Kingdom of Poland and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, formally established by the Union of Lublin in 1569. It created one of the largest and most populous states in Europe, stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. Governed by a unique system of noble democracy, the Commonwealth was ruled by an elected monarch and a powerful parliament where the nobility held significant influence. The Commonwealth was notable for its political structure, which promoted religious tolerance and a high degree of autonomy for its constituent regions. It was multicultural and multi-ethnic, home to Poles, Lithuanians, Ruthenians, Ukrainians, Belarusians, Jews, Armenians, and Germans. Its golden age was in the late 16th and early 17th century, with flourishing arts, science, and political power, particularly under kings like Stefan Báthory and Sigismund III of Vasa. Despite its size and influence, the Commonwealth's decentralized system led to political instability. The liberum veto, which allowed any noble to dissolve the Sejm by objecting to legislation, often paralyzed the government. Meanwhile, external pressure grew. The 17th century brought wars with Sweden, Russia, and the Ottoman Empire, which strained resources and weakened central authority. Internal unrest, such as the Khmelnytsky uprising in Ukraine, further strained the Commonwealth. The weakening of royal authority and reliance on noble privilege prevented meaningful reform, and by the 18th century, neighbouring powers took advantage of the Commonwealth's vulnerability, partitioning it and destroying the Commonwealth once and for all. But as you can tell, the Commonwealth in Trench Crusade is very different to that of our own world. Namely, it still exists, and has far less territory than ours had. The lack of main neighbours who brought on its downfall, not existing, explains why it remains, and as a strong force with the faithful, it no doubt sent hussars and infantry down to assist in the Balkan front. Beside them is an interesting spot. the Principality of Kiev. Within this, the Cossacks and the Kievan Rus. An interesting look, considering in our timeline, I can't quite tell if they are one nation or three, if they are all under the Principality or their own nations. The Principality of Kiev was a successor state of the Kievan Rus, a medieval Eastern Slavic confederation centered in Kiev. Following the fragmentation of the Kievan Rus in the 12th century due to internal strife and succession disputes, the once dominant city of Kiev lost much of its political power, but retained religious and symbolic significance as the cradle of Eastern Slavic civilization and Orthodox Christianity. Despite its decline in the later 12th century, Kiev remained the religious heart of Rus, home to the Orthodox Church's metropolitan. The principality persisted in a weakened form until it was absorbed by the Grand Duchy of Lithuania in the 14th century. It had both the lands of the Cossacks and the Kievan Rus at one point, and is scarily close to the Golden Khanate. This is clearly the Mongols, who seem to be battling the Hellish forces alongside the Scythians along the Caspian Sea. Now, they are probably one of the factions that would interest me the most, since they were not Christian, any Abrahamic religion for that matter. They also were fearsome enemies of Europe, and I'm curious to see if they are still contentious with them, or if the intervention from hell stopped hostilities between them to face the greater evil. Considering the Mongols only arrived in Europe during the 13th century, I'm curious as to their relations with the Europeans, and does this mean the main east area is mostly unaffected and has not been reached by the forces of hell by this point? Since why would the Mongols come to Europe if they were dealing with a front in Asia? This also means that the Black Death may actually have come to Europe anyway in this world, since it was the Mongols who brought it. Below them are the Scythians. The Scythians were a group of nomadic Iranian-speaking people who dominated the vast Eurasian steppe from around the 9th century BC to the 2nd century AD. Originating in Central Asia, they migrated westward and became prominent across the Pontic-Caspian steppe, covering parts of modern-day Ukraine, southern Russia, and Kazakhstan. Renowned for their horse riding skills and archery, the Scythians developed a mobile warrior-based culture. They lived in tribal confederations, practiced pastoralism, and left behind rich burial mounds called kurgans, which contained ornate gold artifacts, weapons, and even mummified bodies. Greek historians, especially Herodotus, wrote extensively about them, often highlighting their fierce independence and unusual customs. The Scythians engaged in trade and warfare with neighbouring civilizations, including the Greeks, Persians, and Thracians. They resisted invasion by major empires such as the Persian campaign of Darius I, which ultimately failed to subdue them. By the 3rd century BC, their power began to wane due to the pressure from other nomadic groups such as the Sarmatians. Eventually, they were pushed out of the steppe and confined to the Crimean Peninsula, where a smaller Scythian kingdom persisted until Roman times. Despite their decline, the Scythians left a long-lasting impact on steppe warfare, art, and the history of Eurasian nomads. So far, we have heard nothing from them in the lore, about either how they survived, how they lasted this long, or why they're fighting hell in this area, not in Crimea. And we know next to nothing about their fight against hell. I assume them, the Principality of Kiev, the Khanate, all have somewhat of a united front against hell, along the Black Sea and the Caspian. Below them is the Iron Sultanate, and let me just say, this is not at all where I expected them to be. Although I believe this placement could make sense if it closes off after the map, we can see the key areas of the Iron Sultanate: Aleppo, Baghdad, the House of Wisdom, Tehran, Kufa, major named cities spread across the Sultanate, untouched by the forces of hell, and of course, New Damascus, the capital, and the greatest structure of all, the Iron Wall, where my guess of where it was completely off. See, I had originally thought it would go a bit into Turkey, wrap around Armenia, and be completely surrounded, with Alamut being its own area not close to the wall at all, which would make it more impressive as to how they were surviving this long. I didn't know how far back it would go into the Middle East, and I guess those questions won't be answered just yet by the creators. It's yet to be seen whether the Iron Wall fully closes off a circle of the Middle East and the Muslim world, or if it is just a singular line with behind it defended from the hellish threat entirely. Now, I do notice there is the ending of the Iron Wall on the Caspian Sea. Maybe this is why the hellish forces have gone over the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea to maybe naval invade behind the wall to avoid it, but that's just speculation. Now, the closest faithful faction to the Iron Wall is the lands of New Antioch, the last bastion of Christianity in the Levant. The Principality of New Antioch stands as the mightiest fortress of the faithful. After the original city of Antioch was obliterated in 1545 by a demonic weapon, it seemed the faithful had lost their last stronghold in the Levant. Yet, against overwhelming odds, the garrison held out amidst the ruins, repelling waves and waves of heretic assaults. This unyielding defiance inspired the Sword Congress of Vienna to reconstruct the city, not only for its strategic value, but as a powerful symbol. New Antioch's survival is due to its unbreakable walls, guarded by 77 great towers and manned by hundreds of shrine anchorites. The city is a melting pot of languages, cultures, and faiths, united by a common cause: resistance against hell. Volunteers from across Christendom join its ranks, making it a hub of innovation and sacrifice. Though New Antioch cannot hope to match Hell's endless hordes alone, it endures thanks to the internal strife among the demonic legions. As archdemons vie for dominance, few have managed to rally the strength to breach the city. To this day, there has been 8 great sieges, all of which have failed. The Duke of Antioch commands all the faithful forces on the front, and though many foreign units operate independently, still the Principality's core army, made of those who renounce all else to serve God and Duke Constantine, remains the faithful's strongest fighting force. New Antioch is the sword and shield of Christendom, the home of hopes. Surrounding New Antioch is the domains of Hell. Clearly labelled is the original Hellgate of Jerusalem. Surrounding it, heretic forces and demons torch the land, infecting it, and bringing ruin wherever they go. As you can see, they have taken most of the Levant, everything bar the Iron Wall. They have made their way into Egypt with the domain of Mammon. Mammon owns his own area on Earth, and it would seem he is going towards the Golden Empire of Mali, probably for the fact that it has golden in the name and has a lot of gold. Shocker, I know. And as we can see, there is Beelzebub ruling the city of Ekron, which he has taken and turned into the worst place imaginable to catch a cold. Above it is the infected areas of Turkey. Now, I notice here, we heard that Byzantium fell in the lore, and that Constantinople was breached and destroyed. What I'm surprised at is there is no part further into the Balkans that has been taken by Hell. Another interesting thing to notice is Trebizond, a region of unconquered area without an iron wall, without the forces of New Antioch. I believe this is where the last stand of the Varangian Guard is occurring. They have been holding these mountains for centuries since the fall of Byzantium, which means I have a lot to look forward to because Byzantium is one of my favourite historical empires. So I hope we'll hear more about Trebizond and the remnants of Byzantium. I do want to talk about how I feel Hell should have more territory. This feels rather small for near 800 years of constant losing warfare from the faithful forces. Or at least in my opinion, I thought they were being pushed back on most fronts, and it was only the fact they kept sending so many people into the meat grinder and kept having to make new inventions to try and push back the hellish forces that, well, allowed them to live. I didn't expect the hellish forces to push that far into the Caucasus and like the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea. But honestly, now that I see it, I believe it should be more. I would have thought the region of the Scythians would be completely overrun. since we know Byzantium got destroyed, I didn't expect Athens to take over Greece. Or maybe it's just a Greek state called Athens. I'm not sure what they mean by this. But I was sort of convinced that it would be most of this Baltic area up towards Wallachia, which has its own capital of Targovishte, which is really interesting. Dracula is probably real, probably a vampire, and probably killing demons. Vlad the Impaler is definitely having a lot of fun. I was thinking maybe it would link up with the portion of hell that managed to invade Croatia and Serbia and former Yugoslavia, really, and that it would be like this wild breach into Europe, held back by the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the Kingdom of Hungary, and Wallachia. Now, I also felt they'd own more of Africa. I felt Mammon was much closer to the Golden Empire of Mali than this, although we don't know how far down into Egypt he controls. I could see him maybe pushing into Numidia a bit more, or I suspected it as much. I thought Morocco and Numidia would be much smaller and like just about holding back the Hellish forces. I thought the cursed city of Cordoba and all these regions would control maybe half of Iberia and pushing far more into Morocco than it is currently. This makes it feel a lot more fair on the faithful forces, which could be what's intended. I'm sure there'll be more maps to come, and I'm sure events will occur in the history that push more and more territory back from the faithful, and maybe the Hellish forces have new portals to open in other places. But yeah, I just wanted to say I do feel maybe there should have been some more under the forces of hell. Not that this is a problem, I still love the map, I just think it doesn't look as bleak as I expected it to. Not that that's really a problem. Now, of course, there are a few more factions that aren't on this map that I'm surprised. What about the Ethiopians? I remember there was the forces of Abyssinia fighting Mammon personally down in Africa, so I'm surprised that wasn't included in the map. But I'm excited to see what most of Africa looks, because if Mammon has managed to reach all the way down to Abyssinia, I feel that would make him far more threatening. Also, I absolutely love the designs of the demons that we see here. Beelzebub looks horrific and Mammon looks dripped out, which I love. We can see also in the seas that beside New Antioch and around New Antioch, they have naval supremacy. And Cyprus is its own independent thing, also probably helping New Antioch keep reinforced. We can see the Papal States also control the naval territory around them, as well as over in Spain, which is an interesting choice, which I feel will probably be expanded on more in the lore later. I feel there is a lot more to come. I feel we're going to get a lot more expansions of the map, and that this is only the start of seeing the world. I look forward to seeing more, and I just can't wait. Also, Ultima Thule. I didn't really know what this meant until I watched Feel No Pain's video on it. Now, I'm not just going to copy him and tell you everything about it, but as we can see here, Iceland is renamed Ultima Thule. If you want to know what that's about, go watch Feel No Pain's video on it. Duke does a very good job at explaining the lore and the conspiracy around it. It's a very fun video. Go watch it. But yeah, that is all. I also want to say, are we going to get a map of the Americas? Because we know it was never colonized, but I'm sure there are stories to be told from the Americas with Native American empires such as the Aztecs and the indigenous Americans fighting against Hellish forces. I'm sure there's a story to be told there. As well as with the Far East, as I do feel the Iron Wall only encircles territory. It does not just act as a buffer, as a wall crossing the full way across the Middle East, saving India and Afghanistan and other nations from the Hellish armies. I feel they definitely have a way around and have been conquering them. So when we get a full world map, I believe we'll see just how dire the situation really is for the faithful forces. But yeah, that has been the history and lore of almost every faction within the map. Thank you guys for watching. I've been talking for 46 minutes. This is quite an effort for just one video. If you've enjoyed this type of video, it's a bit less scripted, I'm sure you could tell, but it's just my thoughts mainly and the histories of these interesting factions. If you wish for anything else, tell me in the comments. If you didn't like this video, tell me in the comments. If you just want me to go back to my scripting and just talking about histories of each nation and their lore and their stories, do tell me. I noticed a few days ago, by the time I'm recording this, a huge lore drop on the Fortress of Alamush along with art came out, and that will be the next video. I'm sorry, Temple of Metamorphosis fans. I swear it'll come out at some point, but the new lore is just so cool. I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe, please. And yeah, I absolutely love this map. I want it on my wall. I'm going to get it printed someday.